This is report number 2 for group number 3. We have Neil Henry, who was our timekeeper, Sandra Sotelo, which was our facilitator, and myself, Sunshine Castro, and I was the reporter. For something that Sandra Sotelo would like help with on her data plan, collection plan, is the variables that she will study. She's not sure how she should develop them in writing. She does need actual research articles. This means that report actual research findings that lets her know what other researchers have done prior to her study. Something I would like help with on my data collection plan is the possible conditions that must exist in order to observe how my lower performing ESL students, for example, my higher performing students are usually the more likely to participate in classroom discussion. I want to see what scenarios that I can create that will pull out the discussion opportunities for the reluctant speakers in my class. Something that Neil Henry would like help with on his data collection plan is a combination of gathering articles as well as interviews. He thinks that interviewing some ESL teachers to see what methods they have used to get an idea of what works and what doesn't. Between interviews and research articles, he could present both comparisons and differences. When we looked at each other's data collection plans, we examined the following questions. The first one was, what match seems to exist or not exist between the proposed data collection plan and inquiry question? Neil looked at Sandra Sotelo's and answered it this way. I would say that plan that is provided coincides with inquiry question. Specific areas are focusing on both interviewing parents and students of those parents. The interview process will give an understanding to the dynamics of parents. When Sandra and Neil answered this question when looking at my data collection plan, Sandra said, I strongly believe that Sunshine's proposed data collection plan and inquiry questions seem to match because her data collection plan is aligned with her wondering statement. Neil said after conducting his initial plan, he will use a few methods of Sunshine's plan because it was specific but detailed as well to give the best answers to her wondering. When I read Neil Henry's data collection plan, I said that Neil's data collection plan coincides with his inquiry question. He has stated that he doesn't have a classroom of his own, but through literature and observations in an ESL classroom, he is well on his way at getting results that he is looking for. The second question that we looked at are there additional types of data that will give insights into his or her question? When Neil looked at Sandra Sotelo's data collection plan, he answered, I suggested the possibility of recording her interviews, doing an initial interview and a follow-up interview. That would see if there were any student growth in answering questions. This, I believe, will serve two purposes: gathering data for Sandra while observing the growth of her students. Sandra answered this question with my data collection plan and said that I strongly believe that additional types of data that will give insights into her question is to try to provide sentence stems to all of her students as to make the ones that need them feel awkward. This way, she can compare data from before sentence stems were provided to when sentence stems were provided, and see if they were more willing to participate in discussions. When I looked at Neil Henry's data collection plan, I answered that question with, I think that if he finds a specific area within interactive tools or defines what those tools are, that it would focus in on the areas that he is looking for. The third question that we looked at was, in what ways does the proposed timeline for study align with each step in the action research process? When Neil looked at Sandra Sotelo's data collection plan, he says, I don't think there is a specific timeline for this inquiry. I think this is a process that stems to be throughout the school year from my assumption. I did the same with mine by not having a definitive timeline. Having one will explain the steps and help keep study on track. Sandra and Neil answered this question with mine by Sandra said, I strongly believe that this timeline is appropriate as it will be easy to monitor students' progress throughout. I love that she broke down her data collection plan and planned accordingly a plan B depending on the data she first receives. Neil says Sunshine's follow-up progress I think is strong. I like that there is a follow-up because she may not get all of the data that would be sufficient to answer her inquiry. Having a follow-up later in the interviewing stage provides a possibility for her inquiry to be answered sufficiently. Looking at Neil Henry's paper, I think that observing teachers and researching areas fits the timeline set out in this process. The next question that we looked at is the rate of doability of this plan for inquiry. In what ways is the plan meshed with the everyday work of a teacher? When Neil looked at Sandra Sotelo's data collection plan, he said that I think Sandra's plan is doable because her plan implemented the daily work of a teacher while recognizing specific events that I believe that teachers would use on a daily basis. For example, celebration of a holiday. Regarding my plan, Sandra said that she strongly believes the Sunshine's plan for inquiry is doable and realistic because they are real-life needs that are current in her own classroom and with her own students. Neil says that I believe in Sunshine's plan because it uses different types of methods to gather the information needed. She included open-ended questions along with videotape. With regard to Neil Henry's plan, I answered, this plan is very doable and important to the everyday work of the educator. Interactive tools and looking at the cultural differences amongst ESL students is valuable to our profession. And finally, with regard to the last question, we looked at the question, what possible disconnects and problems do you see? Neil, when he looked at Sandra's plan, he said the disconnect I could possibly see would be during the classroom portion, while trying to gather data, still being able to instruct the students and focus on their needs. Another disconnect could be getting parents in to be able to conduct interviews. Sandra answered that I could possibly see students regress to the silent period or silent stage of speaking when being presented with a sentence stem to follow if only provided and used for them. This is why my suggestion of using sentence stems with everyone will make them feel at ease. Neil said the problem that I see would be an issue that Sunshine brought up, which was her Korean female student and her interacting. I think the students that may not be comfortable can make the data collection for her difficult. As for myself, when I looked at Neil Henry's plan, the only problem that I see is that he will be an outside observer of classrooms, and students tend to change how they behave when there's a new person in a room. They tend to behave more naturally with new people over time. And because of this constraints of time that we have in this project, this may be an area of concern. The first concept that we covered in the readings was strategy 4, interviews. Everyone in the group felt that the interviews were a crucial part in gathering information. While Sunshine included sample interview questions, I think that having specific questions for interviews will give hard data that could be used to compare and contrast with article research. We also looked at strategy 1, article research in the form of collecting literature as data. And each of the group members wondering, literature as data helps provide documentation that supports other data gathering strategies. We also looked at strategy 5 and 7, video as data. Sunshine's plan was to incorporate video data with focus group. A suggestion to Sandra's plan was to incorporate video. Using video can capture moments that an educator may miss in direct interaction with students due to the nature of teaching. Video may collect behavior, student norms, etc. This provided will give Sunshine to reflect on data captured that could strengthen answers into her inquiry.